Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of the Concealed Carry Podcast. Of course, we do these shows live, typically Tuesdays and Thursdays. Today's Wednesday because yesterday's episode got messed up. But here we are. We are back. I got myself and Grandpa here.
Yes, Grandpa.
Funny thing is, you are nowhere close to being a grandfather.
No,
You got a
thank
few
God. No.
years before that little one grows up, but
Thank God.
but you're getting ready, well in advance to play the part, aren't you?
Yeah, we just had the discussion about the beard. She's like, "You look like ancient." I said, "I know, but I mean,
You look so wise. Like I think
I don't
more
know."
people are listening to the podcast because they take a look at you and go, man, this guy must really know his stuff. He's
Yeah,
seen so much in his life.
or they're amazed that like you got a transient in front of a computer screen to talk for an hour. I don't know.
We dragged this guy in off the street.
Uh,
Good afternoon, Dean. Guys, thanks for joining the show today. Got quite a topic lined up. This one's going to be titled "Handling Traffic Stops with Law Enforcement." We've been getting some interesting questions and comments and messages and stuff from people about various policies, almost like policy changes that have been going on in some jurisdictions across the country. And some departments are stopping people just because they're not from around there. Like, well, in the case of what is it? Rhode Island is like stopping people coming in from New York. It's like almost like a literal checkpoint at the state
it's
line.
crazy.
Florida is stopping people apparently that are from out of state, or especially if they're from if they have like New York plates and stuff. If you live in the Florida Keys, well, that's the point. Like only people that I think live in the Keys are able to visit the Keys right now and cross the bridges. Um, anyway, we thought we'd revisit the topic of handling law enforcement stops because I think it's on some people's minds. That's what we'll talk about today. That was actually our third episode ever of the podcast, going back over 4 years now ago.
Wow.
And we had a special guest with us on us, a retired law enforcement officer from he was from a Denver metro area agency. Nice guy, and got his input and feedback on what he thought about traffic stops. And it's been one of the most listened to episodes ever. So we have big shoes to fill, Matthew.
Yeah, we'll try. I have small feet, so it's going to be difficult.
Now, if we have time, we might even get into a couple other topics. We'll just kind of see how it goes and see where the conversation leads us today. Good crowd of you checking in today. Thanks for being with us. Hello, Joe, and another Joe, and Ken, and Brett, and Shayna. Shayna asks if we have any info on some guy getting arrested for throwing a coronavirus party. No, actually, I haven't even heard about that. To be frank with you, even though I tend to follow the news probably more closely than the average American, I've been kind of ignoring it a little bit, mostly because all I see is coronavirus. If I open up my Fox News app, it's coronavirus stories for like 2 pages. I get it, guys. Okay, like coronavirus. Wow, it's a thing. I guess the big news is that apparently the Chinese have lied about their numbers. That's not a surprise.
No.
But there's some actual. Seems like there's a little more merit to that theory. What was, I would say, a theory, a very plausible theory. But apparently there's some intelligence that would suggest that I guess some images have surfaced of like thousands of urns piled up in front of like funeral homes or whatever they use in China. So that's definitely suspect.
Yeah, I heard that I heard the government was paying some of these families to not like publicize that they had deaths in their family and stuff early on. So
Paying? Are you kidding me? It's China, dude. Like all I gotta say is, you say anything, we send you to Gulag.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
very true.
Or we kill you. Yeah. No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm not saying what you're saying is incorrect, but anyway.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know.
yeah, it's not a surprise at all. Like, frankly, I was surprised when all of a sudden, like, China was a big story, and then all of a sudden they're like, no, no, not really any new cases.
Yeah, we're
Like,
good.
really? China? Like, I understand you guys really locked yourselves down, but yeah, I don't know. I've been suspect of those numbers for some time, especially seeing how it's been progressing in Italy, Spain, France, of course, here in the States, which it's going gangbusters now.
Hmm.
Man, did you realize that New York is responsible for like 40 or 45% of the nation's case count and death count?
Yeah, it's definitely bad there. I mean, and I think that the count's obviously going up because now we're testing more people, Um,
Yeah.
but who knows how many people actually have it? There's obviously a lot more than what's
Yep.
reported.
Yep. That's a crazy time. Well, let's dive into today's topic, and so we will begin the officially recorded portion of today's audio show. That meaning the part that actually goes out on the podcast audio feed. So let's do it in 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 403. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I am joined by Matthew Maruster, Mr. Producer Extraordinaire, Master Chief.
Glad to be here with you, man. Working remotely.
Yeah, right. Like nothing's changed in regards to you and me and how we work together and associate together.
Right.
We've been pretty much always podcasting from home. And of course, this is not the only thing we do. Matthew actually does quite a bit and overseeing the instructor network at concealedcarry.com, getting instructors lined up, classes, all that stuff up on the website. Of course, right now is kind of a interesting time because more and more classes are being canceled as a result of coronavirus.
Right.
So stay tuned. We're definitely contacting people where those are happening, with those cancellations, and so it is what it is. But for the future, and we definitely have some like Guardian pistol courses lined up for later on this year. You can see those on our website at class.concealedcarry.com. Now, today's episode, we're talking about handling traffic stops with law enforcement. This will be a really interesting topic and one that we've touched on. We definitely talk about these sort of things that come up in conversation during the regular production of our podcast episodes here and there, but we haven't revisited this solely as a subject since way back at episode 3, which is more than 4 years ago now. So here we are, episode 403, and we are talking about, again, handling traffic stops with law enforcement. Of course, we have Matthew, who is a former law enforcement officer, served in the Southern California area, and then I also served as a law enforcement officer in the past as well, and have been involved, obviously, in doing some traffic related stops. My most recent one was a DUI arrest. So, anyway. It'll be an interesting topic today. Now, we do have an episode sponsor, which is guns.com. Right now, I get questions almost on a daily basis, mostly from like friends and neighbors and people that know me more personally and don't really follow what I do so much on a professional basis. But the question is, you sell guns, right? And I'm like, no, I don't sell guns. Although I've thought about, getting an FFL or that sort of thing. But we as a business, concealedcarry.com, we're in the concealed carry business, not the gun business. And we actually used to sell things like ammunition as well on our site, but that, to be honest with you, it just wasn't really worth it. You guys would be surprised how narrow the margins are on ammunition sales. Right now, that could be changing, but as far as those margins could be getting better as the demand is far outstripped the supply. But one way I'm answering folks' questions about where to buy a gun is, well, just head on over to guns.com and get access to their entire lineup and inventory of guns. They have an inventory. I've seen some local shops here that are basically out. But guns.com's got inventory, and you just might find your next gun buy there at guns.com. They also sell ammo. They also sell other things too. But if you're also looking to buy or to sell a gun, that's another option as well. And they make that process super easy as well. So check out guns.com. All righty. Let's move on to the topic then. We actually have had a few questions come in recent history, people asking and talking about various things. And there's been talk about law enforcement officers making stops of folks for a variety of reasons. I mean, there's some that have been stopped in their communities. Apparently, these are all, I'm just seeing various stories here and there where that community is under some kind of stay-at-home order. Let's face it, we're basically under lockdown as a country. It may not be as hard of a lockdown as maybe what they're doing in some other countries, but we're under lockdown, encouraging people to stay home and not get out and do things really. So some are saying that people are being stopped and almost questioned, like, what are you doing out? Show me your papers. There's definitely documented instances of people being stopped and questioned when they are traveling from, like, say, New York to places like Rhode Island. The Rhode Island governor has kind of come under fire this last week because of the policy there. To actually is even suggested they might go door to door and look for people that are hiding out in Rhode Island that have come from New York. And New York is basically ground zero right now for coronavirus, representing a significant percentage of the nation's cases. But boy, some of these measures seem rather extreme to me, Matthew. Now, I don't see it so much here in Colorado, I'll be honest. I mean, we're under a statewide stay-at-home order like many other places as well. But to be honest with you, I get out a little bit because, our business is actually one of the exempted businesses. We have our whole medical product line now as well, Mountain Man Medical, and that by itself exempts us from the stay-at-home order. Now we've taken steps for sure as a business to protect our employees and protect our customers as well, but we're still in business and still operating. And later today, I'll be down to the warehouse dropping some things off that need to get shipped out. But as I'm driving around, I'll be honest, I have hardly seen any police, like, at all. Yeah. So to me, it looks like there's not a whole lot going on with that sort of. There's not a whole lot of, say, like, enforcement going on in Colorado, other than some stories I've heard out of Denver city proper, where mostly it's like citations to businesses that have remained open when they're not an exempt business, and also people like congregating in parks when they're not supposed to be, violating the whole 6 feet away rule and that kind of stuff. Right. So that's what I've been seeing. I haven't really been seeing much. Like, I don't remember the last time I saw a police officer with somebody pulled over here in Colorado. So it's been a while. But again, we're hearing these various reports. So here's the thing. How do we handle ourselves as concealed carriers? Keep in mind the concealed carry context, this being our podcast and all. How do we handle ourselves in a traffic stop? So let's kind of walk. I actually want to hear from you, Matthew. Walk us through, from an officer's perspective, how, kind of the initiation of a traffic stop and what you experienced when you were playing cop.
Right. Sure. Yeah. So obviously state laws are different, right, on the duties to notify, but we can get into that a little bit later. But basically, if you think about it, the officer needs to have some sort of probable cause to pull you over. You violated some sort of traffic law, or maybe they saw you commit a criminal violation, something. And so they're going to initiate a traffic stop. So they light you up, you pull over. From what most people may not realize is officers are trying to see in the car before they even stop the car, right? Like you're watching the person's head in front of you, if they're dipping below the seat and stuff like that, if they're turning around acting nervously, stuff like that. So you're kind of getting an idea of like who you're stopping, trying to, see what's going on, if they're trying to make furtive movements to hide things or whatnot. But once you stop, many officers will put out the traffic stop and call in or let dispatch know, hey, this is the plate, this is where I am. But in busy departments and things like that, you may not be able to get that information to dispatch because you're, in line. So you just put it out there. They're not giving you a readout on, if that plate's stolen or whatnot. So they may or may not know. I know in certain states, when a police officer runs the plates, they can see that so-and-so is issued, this registered owner has a concealed handgun license issued to them. So some people will be like, oh, well, they know when they're coming up that I have a concealed handgun license. So maybe I have a gun in the car. So why should I say anything if I don't have to? And that's one, thought, but don't assume that they know, because obviously you may not be the registered owner of the vehicle. The officer doesn't know that probably, and they may not even get that information back before they come up to you and approach you. So that's kind of, just don't assume that they know what's going on with the vehicle or whatnot. Another thing is I hear a lot of people, okay, I'll put the gun up on the dashboard. But when I made traffic stops, unless I wasn't a traffic cop, I was looking for criminal violations. Right. So I would, basically, to try to get gangbangers and drugs and stuff. So what I would do is I would get out I usually was in a one-person car. So I'd get out and walk around the back side of my car and come up on the passenger side of their vehicle, because almost inevitably everybody's looking in their mirrors and trying to see when you're coming up. And, I may stay in there for 10 seconds, kind of shielded from them. They don't see me, and I can see what they're doing in the car, whether they're hiding stuff before they even know I'm there. So just don't assume that, okay, I can get the gun up here, or I'll reach around until they get up here, because the officer may already be up there on you, kind of observing and trying to see you in your natural habitat, type thing. I would recommend, especially at night, and if you have tinted windows, to put your windows down. Because unless it's minus 20 degrees or something, because and put on your interior lights, because a lot of guns look like cell phones look like guns. You can't see through tinted window as an officer. So if there's people in the back and you're trying to see what's going on inside the vehicle, it can just raise the level of tension and anxiety between the officer and you. And so that's just like one of those things that, if you can, it's a good courtesy thing to do. And that way, nothing is mistaken. And obviously, you don't have to roll down the windows and put on the interior lights, but I would hate for somebody to reach for their cell phone or something and the officer mistake it for a firearm, even if they're wrong, that's wrong. But if they shoot you or something, it doesn't really matter if they're wrong or right. If you end up getting shot. So I think those first initial things kind of set the tone, right? And keep your hands where either on the steering wheel, or keep them folded, like that. I don't know if it's just me or what, but I talk a lot with my hands. So sometimes, officer, hey, I pulled you over for this. Can you grab me your license, registration, proof of insurance? And they may say, yeah, but I got a gun over here. Is that okay? And they point, and all of a sudden your hands are going to places where the officer can't see and stuff. So obviously, you don't have to like put them on your head like you're some sort of hostage, but anywhere that's a neutral position where they're kind of preoccupied, so they don't have a tendency to go somewhere. So that would be my first, initial reaction to kind of what I'm looking for. Officers are looking, and it depends on the type of stop, obviously, but they're looking for compliance, and they're kind of testing your compliance right away. So by asking for simple things like, hey, can you grab me your license, proof of insurance, proof of registration? If they're starting to say, okay, well, hang on, well, what are you stopping me for? This, and this, you're starting to see that there may be some sort of, resistance or something. So you're asking, simple questions. Hey, this is why I stopped you. Where you're heading to tonight. Obviously, you don't have to answer where you're headed to, but it's just like one of those things where you're trying to feel that person out a little bit. So that's what officers are doing when they stop you.
Yeah. Well, and let's be clear as to why. I think you explained it very well, but one of the most dangerous things an officer does is making a traffic stop.
Mm-hmm.
As far as because there's so many variables that they can't control and they can't even know or see. It's different than making a contact with an individual on the street or in some other public place or environment. Um, I mean, obviously, uh, handling a situation at home can also have its come with its various risks, but there's so much going on with vehicles and traffic stops, and not only that, but you're concerned about uh, getting hit by other vehicles. I mean, how often does that happen? That
Yeah.
there's some a huge number of police officers every year that are killed just from being struck by vehicles. A lot of times performing traffic stops or other emergency, response type situations on the roadsides. So there's a reason officers are very careful and cautious, or at least they should be. I've definitely come across those that I'm like, wow, dude, you are way too. It's not about being chill or relaxed as a like personality, but you can just tell watching their body language and how they handle themselves that, dude, you are not switched on enough,
Right.
right? Like if I was a bad dude, like you'd be toast.
Yeah.
Um, and so and again, there's all the risks too, where contrasting it to say responding to various incidents at a home or whatnot or a place of business. Well, this individual is in a vehicle, which the vehicle in of itself can be wielded as a very, very deadly weapon. Can crush you and kill you very, very quickly if they try to use it against you as well that way. So there's a lot of reasons why officers are cautious when they are handling traffic stops, and some cops will have you do certain things that other cops would never even think about having you do. As far as they may go ahead and even request you to shut off the vehicle, to roll down windows, to turn on lights, put the vehicle in park. That's a big one right there too. Like that's definitely, and that was something that officers learned even way back in the 80s and 90s, particularly once we started having more dash cam video, which started coming around more and more in the 90s, looking at incidents where cops were ambushed during traffic stops. A common thread there was individual stopped, has their foot on the brake,
Mm-hmm.
right? If the brake lights are on, like that, like every cop should learn that early on going through their training that brake lights are still on and they're stopped. Either wait until that changes, until they take the foot off the brake, put it in park, or maybe ask them to do so. But handle it differently, because someone that's looking to hurt you and then make a getaway, they're going to keep it in drive. So anyway, my point is we're just kind of providing and setting the tone, the stage, the context for why officers may approach stops a certain way. And of course, that begins, I think, to dictate uh, at least some of our own tactics as citizens, as civilians, as far as how we might conduct ourselves also in that traffic stop. Now, keep in mind, today's episode is not meant to be about constitutional, this or that, and well, did they even have the right to stop me in the first place, and whatnot, because what, rules get broken, unfortunately, more often than they probably should. Stops are made that probably shouldn't occur. I recognize that fact. I'm not immune to that or ignorant of that, and I don't think Matthew is either. So, lest anybody say we're just a bunch of bootlicking, cop, blue line
No.
lovers. Um, I mean, arguably, obviously, I think Matthew and I support our fellow LEOs because we were once there doing that sort of thing as well. But um, this is not meant to be about constitutional issues. Other than I may interject with some thoughts regarding reported stops for suspected, like basically. So I've heard some reports of officers stopping vehicles in Florida that had like New York plates and stuff like that. That is interesting to me for sure,
Yeah.
because if the only suspicion is, New York, they must have coronavirus. I don't, that doesn't jive with me very well at all.
Yeah.
Um, Also, on a more of a lighthearted note, recently, North Carolina's state police released a PR statement essentially saying, during this current pandemic, we're only going to be making stops in cases where it's where we have a reasonable, articulable suspicion. And I'm like, isn't that the standard anytime we pull people over?
Yeah, you'd think, right?
That is how it's supposed to work.
I think it was poorly phrased, right?
Yes, it came off very odd sounding. Someone should have reviewed that a little bit more closely before they released that. But so again, we recognize that there are times where stops may be made, and the stop itself is, a bad stop, like a
Hmm.
stop that shouldn't occur.
Sure.
But here's the reality. Okay, you have been stopped. You have been pulled over by an officer. Okay, you got to stop, because if you don't stop, then it's going to escalate into something else you don't want. Now you're going to be accused of running away from that cop. He's going to chase you down. Things are going to get ugly real quick, and you're going to be, even if at that point, even if what they initially supposedly stopped you for was something small, something minor, something that shouldn't have happened anyway, that they shouldn't have been concerned with. Well, at that point, you just ran from a cop. So that's a whole other issue.
Hmm.
So I guess the point now is to simply address the topic from the assumption that you've been stopped. Now what?
Hmm.
How do we, as a concealed carrier, handle that situation? Now, I'm going to hand it back to Matthew, but I want to point out that you basically have a couple of options, right? You can, and this is under the assumption that you are carrying a gun. You are carrying concealed or otherwise. It doesn't really matter. You have a gun with you in the vehicle. Um, it's not relevant how that gun is possessed. All right, that's beside the point. Just the fact that you have the gun. I'm typically carrying it on my person concealed, right? But I would still handle it the same way if that gun was, heaven forbid, under my seat. That's not where I keep my guns, or tucked between the seat, or in the glove box, or in a whatever, somewhere else. So um, you can play it cool and just not say anything, right? And by the way, I'm not talking about what you're legally obligated to do. I'm just talking about what your options are. You could ignore it and just do nothing about the fact that you have a gun. You can tell the officer that you have a gun, that you are armed, or you can choose to not do anything unless they ask you about it. That's basically your three options.
Hmm.
So now, real quick, to continue kind of establishing the context, there are states that require duty to notify. You can find this on our website. We have a whole bunch of really unique, cool, helpful, resourceful information like this on the website at concealedcarry.com. Things like duty to notify states. We have a whole map and everything, so you can look at it very quickly and visually, and you can see what down below that map, also a summary of what the different states require, because some of them have specific situations. But just as a short list, you have Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, Alaska, Hawaii, Arkansas, Louisiana, Michigan, Ohio, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Maine are all states, that's 12 states, that have a duty to notify law enforcement if you have a gun and or a concealed carry permit or whatever. Okay, so by statute in those states, right? You can debate constitutionality or whatever you want all day long, but by statute, those are the laws that are on the books in those states that require duty to notify.
Hmm.
Then there's a couple of states like California, where that law or that requirement varies by county or city. That's got to be confusing as heck.
Hmm.
And it also is the same in New York. So that's also, that would be problematic. And then there's a handful of states where, like Georgia, Vermont, and New Hampshire, where I think it's on the books, even like there is no duty or something to that effect. I don't know. They're colored in green on the map here. Um, Most other states, you'll see if you're looking at the map, it's kind of like a bluish color. So, including my state here, Colorado, my home state of Idaho, and others, are what you would consider a if asked policy, right? So you can choose to handle that however you want, but there's no duty to notify unless you are asked, in which case you must respond and inform them you are in fact in possession of a gun or whatever. Again, so the distinction between like Georgia, Vermont, and New Hampshire, my understanding with those states is that they simply don't have a duty. Like the officer could even ask, and you could refuse to answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose, arguably, in these other states that say if asked, you could still refuse to answer, but arguably that might violate statute because, again, in some of those states, the way it's worded is pretty clear as far as if asked, you must notify, sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now just to speak from my own personal experience, I've been either in the vehicle or the driver of a vehicle a handful of times in my life when carrying concealed or in possession of a firearm. One of those was interestingly on a hunting trip, and so we had multiple guns in the vehicle, some just right there in the back seat. But where I've never been asked if I had a gun in the vehicle. However, it is a common practice, and sometimes cops will use that as a sometimes they're just trying to figure out intent of what's going on with a particular individual in a particular stop, and use even sense of humor of, to try to extract information such as, well, any guns, knives, grenades, rocket launchers, nuclear bombs, something silly like that, to where the driver kind of chuckles and then says, "Oh no," or "Well, actually." So, but anyway, so that's kind of, does that provide some context, I hope? And then again, I'm going to throw it back to you, Matthew, and kind of let's start talking about, based on all of this context, and recognizing what the statutes may dictate, but then how would you recommend handling oneself during a traffic stop?
Yeah, I mean, all good points as far as like the legal side and duty to notify and all that. And but we can only control our half of the equation, right? Like, not every cop is the same. I know a lot of times people think every cop responds the same or is going to do the same thing, but that's just not true. And so you don't know if you're going to get a cop that's very over the top or very paranoid, or what call they just came from, or one, like Riley said, that just doesn't care, and so you can't control their how their demeanor is or anything. You can control yourself. So and hopefully you can, right? So my advice would be, I keep the registration, proof of insurance in the visor, and obviously my concealed handgun license and my driver's license in my wallet. But in Ohio is a duty to notify. So, I've been pulled over a few times. And basically when I get pulled over, I'm already grabbing the stuff out of the visor. I have it in my hand. If I can grab my wallet really quick, I do, like before, I actually come to a stop, I'll grab it. If not, then I'll just sit there with the registration, proof of insurance, hands on the steering wheel, roll down the windows. He comes up, tells me, "Hey, this is why I stopped you." All right. License, registration, proof of insurance. Here's my registration, proof of insurance. I have my driver's license and my concealed handgun license in my wallet. It's in my back pocket, and I have my firearm with me today. What would you like me to do? And at that point, you're telling them exactly what's going on. You're saying, "I want to comply with you. Just tell me what you like me to do." And then likely, depending on who they are, but a reasonable response would be, "Okay, where's your firearm?" "Okay, I carry it, penning style. It's right on my waistband, side of the waistband, or strong side hip." "All right, just don't reach for it, and go ahead and grab your wallet." If you tell them where your wallet is, or if you're a woman and they say, my driver's license and stuff is in my purse, and they may say, "Okay, where's your firearm?" "Oh, it's also in my purse." At that point, they may say, would you mind handing me your purse? And is it okay if I reach in there and grab it out? You don't have to do that. But if an officer believes that somebody is armed in the vehicle, right, and you've admitted to, so it's reasonable that they would believe that you're armed. They can actually, remove you from the vehicle during the duration of the stop for officer safety purposes. It's not to do a search of the vehicle or search you, but they can for officer safety purposes. So they may say, okay, I don't want you reaching in your purse with the firearm, so I'm going to have you come out of the vehicle, have you sit on the curb over here. I'm just going to reach into your purse now and grab. I mean, that's the only way to do that, right? So sometimes it behooves you to just say, here's my purse or whatnot. But obviously, you anything that would be found while they're going to get your wallet, like a baggie of meth or something. Not saying anybody listening has meth in there, but lots of times, that's happened. You're like, oh, well, I found your wallet, and inside your wallet's like, a crack pipe and some meth, right? Yeah, so I would say be cooperative. You don't have to go. Like Riley said, I love cops. I know sometimes they may overstep their bounds, certain cops, certain times. But I think for the most part, if you work with them, if you're cordial and cooperative, they're more than willing to work with you. And so I think that's the component, right? Like, you don't want to escalate the situation by saying, I didn't stop, or I stopped at a red light. I'm not giving you my ID. I want a supervisor, this and that. You can go that route, but it may make it more difficult for you. And ultimately, you may not have even have gotten a ticket, and you might be on your way, as opposed to, arguing for the sake of an argument.
Yep. Let's be clear. Constitutionally speaking, you are under no obligation to say anything that incriminates yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, refusing to answer questions or whatnot, that is acceptable. However, where people often get themselves in trouble is by refusing to produce documents that in virtually all states, if not all states, by statute are required to be produced as part of an investigation performed during a traffic stop. And we're talking license, registration, and insurance, which, here in the state of Colorado, by statute, upon being stopped, upon being requested for this information, by statute, you're required to produce it. Mm-hmm. Again, there's people that want to fight, against that and refuse to comply, and that's fine. It's your right to do so. However, recognize that you are at that moment violating your state statutes, and it's probably not going to go. Your day is going to be greatly complicated by refusing to comply with that. Again, recognizing that if you feel, well, take that up with the courts, take it up in the courts, file a complaint against that officer or against that department and handle it that way. But and that could be whether you want to make that an issue after the fact, after you have politely concluded the traffic stop, or if you decide to make an issue of it right then and there and get arrested and then try to fight that sort of case, well, that's up to you to decide. Again, we're simply talking in this episode from the perspective of how do we conduct ourselves during a traffic stop that particularly, here's what I'm most, that's what I care about. I am interested in concluding that traffic stop and not having anything occur that even remotely comes close to jeopardizing my life. Because the concern is, again, and this is why we set the stage early on in the episode, is that someone that is stopped, that makes some kind of sudden movement or anything that might be perceived as a threat or a potential threat by that officer, and that could mean that now a gun is being drawn on me. Again, put aside if any of you have emotions about, well, that's wrong for them to do whatever XYZ thing as the cop. But realize that perceptions are perceptions, and human beings are human beings, and mistakes also can be made, including in what they perceive about something. They may perceive something even if it's not actually what's true. All right. Again, we are all human, and the job that an officer does is not an easy job. Love cops, hate cops. The job they do is not an easy job. I don't care who you are. So, anyway, so my whole focus is, how do I conclude this stop without any increased risk to myself? So, and by the way, for the record, we've lost Matthew. I don't know quite what's happened, but he has disappeared here. So we'll see if we get him back. I'm just checking my messages and seeing if there's something. I don't know. He's gone. So hopefully he's able to click the link that I sent him and get back in here, and I'll get him back in the feed. But my approach is to, one, avoid any sudden or furtive movements or anything like that inside the vehicle. So similar to Matthew's approach, I keep all my information in the side pocket of the door of my vehicle. I can reach it and retrieve it and pull it out very quickly and with very minimal movement. So if the officer is approaching the vehicle or watching me from his vehicle prior to initiating contact with me, or he's coming up, he's not going to be seeing a lot of me digging around or grabbing things, because in about 2 seconds, 3 seconds, I've reached down in my side pocket of the door and plucked out those documents. That simple. It's just right there. So that would be one tip, similar again to Matthew, what he suggested, that I would give some thought as to how you stage your documents in the vehicle for access, so that those can be retrieved easily, simply, with little to do about it. I think that right there greatly simplifies that beginning part of the traffic stop. And that's one of the more risky times, as that officer is approaching the vehicle, trying to ascertain who's inside the vehicle, what the intent of those occupants are, and so forth. That would be the first thing. So the second thing is, now we come to that point where contact has been initiated. Typically, the officer will say something to the effect of, "Do you know why I've stopped you?" My recommendation, again, not wanting to self-incriminate, would just be like, "No, why don't you tell me, officer?" And that provides them the opportunity to say, "I've pulled you over because I got you going X speed over the speed limit of X, or I got you running through that stop sign, or running through a red light, or failing to yield, or any number of things," right? So, and then I would just politely be like, "Okay, all right, understood." Again, I don't have to agree with him or accept or even acknowledge that, "Yep, you're right, I was guilty of that." I mean, you can. That's your choice. That's up to you. That's your right to either acknowledge that or not. But the whole time, I would be respectful. Where I see most traffic stops go sideways are situations where people are disrespectful. I understand that you're upset you got pulled over. Your day has been ruined or hampered or inconvenienced or whatever it is. You feel like the stop is unjust, et cetera, et cetera. All these various things. But yet the individual is upset and condescending and disrespectful towards the officer. I would say this much: even if you have a strong disliking or distaste for the officer, I would still recommend that they are treated with respect, because liking someone or hating someone has no bearing on whether we treat people with respect or not. Showing respect tells a lot about a person. And so chances are, if you are disrespectful to an officer, then he will wonder why that is. And again, that speaks volumes about an individual, and that may create additional suspicion in the mind of that officer. So again, that's neither here nor there. That's how human beings work. If you are disrespected by someone, and in whatever capacity of job that you work, you would feel slighted, you would feel offended, you would be like, well, what's your deal? Like, what's your problem? And you'd be very distrustful and suspicious of that individual as to why they are being so disrespectful towards you. This is not necessarily a society versus law enforcement conversation. It's merely just the reality of human beings and human interactions. It's how it works. Okay, socially. Matthew messages me and says that he's trying to get back in, but it's not allowing him back. So this is the first time this has happened, where someone got kicked and then couldn't get back in. So I may be finishing up this episode alone, which would be too bad. But we got a lot of great comments and ideas from Matthew. Now, as to whether you should notify the officer of carrying a gun or being in possession of a gun or not, this is my personal approach. This is me. Okay, I'm not saying this has to be you, but I am generally of the opinion that I will volunteer that information. Okay. And again, I recognize earlier I said you don't have to do anything or say anything that self-incriminates, right? And some people would view an admission like, well, I am carrying concealed today, officer, as being self-incriminating. There's merit to that line of thought, because I don't necessarily like telling a police officer, oh, I've got a gun, what business is it of yours? But again, my number one focus is self-preservation. All right. So I am of the opinion that by me being upfront and putting that out there means a couple of things. Number one, now he knows. Now there's no mystery about it whatsoever. Most likely, a criminal, particularly one that's intent on doing harm to an officer, is not going to volunteer that information prior to then committing that violent act. So, and from my perspective, as well as having been involved in traffic stops, that's how I would feel about it as well, just from the police officer's perspective. Now, that may not be true of every cop, but that certainly, and I'll say this definitely can be different culturally speaking, different areas of the country, particularly ones that are not familiar with the idea or the concept of an armed citizenry. I hate saying that, by the way. That just sounds terrible. But I recognize the fact that you could be in New York, you could be in New Jersey, you could be in areas of California where it's not that common to run into citizens on a day-to-day basis that are carrying guns. Cops in those areas may not be as well trained, I guess, or accepting, or that's just a new strange thing for them to encounter, since it doesn't happen very often for them. And so reactions in some of those areas may be different. Those areas of the country may be different in this regard. So again, I'd advise caution as far as how you approach this. You need to be in tune with where you are, and that sort of sets the course or dictates whether you might follow this advice that I'm providing. And so you could go about this simply by saying, "Sir, I'd like to let you know that I am carrying a concealed firearm and I am permitted to do so. I have a permit for it," or whatever, that sort of thing. Or a technique that I have used for years and I still find great merit in is not saying it verbally, but simply handing over my permit along with my driver's license. I got to give them the driver's license anyway. And it honestly isn't a big deal to hand the permit. And without me even opening my mouth about that subject, without me interrupting the officer, but simply just as part of the process of, here's my documents. That sounds funny to say too, but again, by statute in most states, you're required to handle those typically 3 critical documents: registration, insurance, and driver's license. But I can simply hand over my permit, and that communicates all I need to communicate. I mean, that right there is a nonverbal cue of, all right, permit, and he's probably got his gun with him. All right, mission accomplished. Okay. In situations where I've been involved in, on the passenger or driver side of this type of traffic stop, where this tactic or technique has been used, it usually results in I don't need that, and a handing back of the concealed carry permit. And the officer, in some cases, has said nothing about it. Like, I don't need that. Here you go. All right, I did my part. Or sometimes it's turned into oh, you like guns, huh? Like what kind of guns do you like, or what gun are you carrying, or what's your favorite, that sort of thing. I've had roadside conversations with police officers about guns, and that actually goes, typically the ones that are interested in that sort of thing, usually goes very well. And you know what? If I show respect, and if I can even sort of befriend this officer, because I guarantee you they get a lot of not so friendly interactions with the public and their vehicles throughout the day, there's a high probability that he says, you know what, you seem all right. Have a great day. I'm letting you off with a warning. That sounds like a good deal to me. Okay. Again, this is my approach. Now, one thing that always choosing to volunteer, whether, or at least most, again, always is a strong word, but I typically, in almost all contexts, would volunteer this information. Choosing to do so eliminates the problem of being in one jurisdiction where notification is required, and me forgetting or failing to do so, and then somehow being found out, because then I'm probably in other hot water if I failed to comply with that part of the statute. So simply notifying as a general rule means that I don't have to be as much concerned about, and this is especially applicable in a state, say, like California, where, again, requirement to notify varies from county or city to city. That's very, very problematic, because I'm not going to keep track of all the different cities and counties and which ones require me to notify, which ones don't. Now, to be fair, you could choose to not notify, even in a state where you have a duty to do so, and the firearm never becomes part of the equation of that traffic stop, and no big deal, like no harm, no foul sort of thing. But the concern would be that if for some reason, somehow, during the course of this traffic stop, knowledge, or it becomes known that I am in fact possessing a gun and I fail to notify, that's a problem. Here's my bigger concern. If for whatever reason it becomes known during the traffic stop that I have a gun and I didn't tell the officer about it, in some cases, in some contexts, that could turn violent very quickly. Meaning, how could this happen? Well, maybe you choose to carry your driver's license or whatever, a wallet. This is not an uncommon practice, in your front pocket, one of your front pants pockets. And in the course of you digging into your pocket, as you bring your hand up or something, maybe you expose underneath your shirt, and all of a sudden the cop sees a glimpse, and it doesn't take much, of that gun, and goes, oh, snap. What do you think is going to happen? And he may even perceive or think that you might be attempting to draw it. Crazier things have happened in traffic stops. So I'm trying to point out all of these different points of potential failure, I guess, is maybe, I don't know how else to explain it, where a traffic stop can go from being a benign traffic stop to turning into something else entirely very quickly. So just food for thought. This should provide some context for you, those of you listening, viewing, to go, okay, all right, this is how, based on what I'm hearing on the podcast today, I'm going to think about myself, my own circumstances, and also where I live, the jurisdiction that I am in, the laws that exist, whatever it is. And you come up with a pre-planned way of handling a traffic stop. Every plan could be a little different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, person to person. But the one thing I think that should exist in all those plans is that I'm going to communicate with the officer, even if I hate his stinking guts, even if I think he's completely in the wrong for stopping me. I am still going to do every bit of my best to be respectful in my interaction with him, because disrespect usually it just causes problems. All right. And we can be respectful even when we have a dislike for the situation or the person. And that's just a basic human principle. Call it a Christian principle, call it whatever you want. A golden rule sort of thing, don't care. That's just being human. So that's kind of about all I got to say about that. Now, I know I've seen some questions and good comments pop up here. And Matthew has continued trying to get back in, and for whatever reason, the tech has just decided to not work for him today, and that's too bad. But we'll begin wrapping it up here in just a few minutes. But I was going to take a quick look here at see if there was some. I thought there was a question that popped up, and I wanted to come back to. So Elke asked, "What do cops think about gun/NRA stickers on vehicles?" Well, here's what I would think as a cop if I were doing that, and if I was doing daily traffic work, meaning that I was doing stops all the time. If I was approaching a vehicle that had a gun related sticker, not gun related, meaning it's a sticker of a gun about gun rights, certain gun organizations, whatever, doesn't matter, tells me, there's a high probability this person is a gun person and probably have a gun in their vehicle. So that would be another great reason to not put those stickers. We've talked on the podcast before about how that could make your vehicle a target for theft, and that definitely is a thing. And I could point you to at least a couple of news stories where vehicles were in fact targeted because of gun-related stickers on the vehicle itself, which is why I choose not to place any of those on my vehicle. But the funny thing is sometimes the same people that will complain about, law enforcement, what right do they have knowing what I've got, or make jokes about the ATF when people talk about guns and stuff in online internet forums. Some of those same people have gun stickers on their vehicle. Well, you are admitting a lot by having that. Tells a lot about you having those stickers on your vehicle. So that's a pretty good indication that guns may come up as part of that the conversation in that traffic stop. So just understand, right? Everything I give, I honestly don't care what you guys do or the approach that you take with these traffic stops or interactions with law enforcement. But I try to approach it from a matter of fact that if you do XYZ thing, then ABC is what happens. Just a reality. All right. So, but a good question there, Elke, about stickers on the back of your vehicle. Let's see. I thought there was one other thing that popped up here. I'll just take another look. In lieu of having Matthew to bounce things off of. Let's see. What's your favorite gun? Yeah. That I had probably a good 10-15 minute conversation with one police officer once during a traffic stop. That was a fun one for sure. And yes, I was actually not the driver of that at that time, and we got off with a warning. It was just a simple speeding violation. So, I mean, is that fair? Again, recognizing, let's actually kind of shift gears just real quick, and this would be a good place to kind of go to and start wrapping it up. What about a traffic stop in the current situation of things with all this coronavirus talk and these community-wide, statewide, stay-at-home, shelter-in-place, whatever orders? So let's just suppose that you are stopped by an officer. I think it's kind of I don't think it's right for cops to stop people because they're out and about and question them, why are you out and about under the shelter at home or shelter in place order or whatever. But that's neither here nor there. Let's just accept the fact that that could be the reality, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. Some are enforcing this very heavy-handedly, and others aren't really. So let's say you are stopped, and the purpose of that stop is there's a shelter in place order. What are you doing out and about? How would you handle that? Again, I would encourage you to be respectful. But do I need to answer? Do I have to answer? Am I obligated to answer? I don't think you are. Now, he could choose to cite you. In some states, they are citing people for violation of orders. And you know what? I suspect there are going to be a lot of lawsuits post coronavirus of various government entities and agencies over stuff that's happened during all of this mess. And that's the beauty of the Constitution that we have, is that we have the opportunity for redress from the government, that we have a court system, right? Imperfect though it may be, but you have, and I'll tell you what, it's imperfect, but it's far better than most systems in the world, by far, in a lot of cases. Just the fact that you can actually go to the court and say XYZ thing about the government and my rights were violated, whatever, that's a really amazing, powerful thing that exists because of our Constitution. So, make up a story. That's called lying, but all right, if that's how you choose to handle it, refuse to answer the officer's questions or simply answer truthfully. This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm out and about. Didn't know there was any, whatever. But again, I think it comes down to being respectful in that interaction, because that is going to, I think, substantially increase the chances that stop goes relatively smoothly. Okay. Yeah, there you go. I think that's about all I got about that. I love and believe in the Constitution. I'm also a realist and a pragmatist, and that I recognize that, there are certain laws and things on the books, though I may disagree with them. They are on the books, and that does mean that they can be, in fact, enforced. And that may result in situations that we don't want to have happen. But at the end of the day, if I'm just simply respectful, it probably will resolve itself fairly smoothly. There's some interesting comment going on with the Facebook comments here of how a lot of cops are not gun guys. And then Shayna responds saying a lot of cops in her area are probably more into guns than the ones that aren't. Again, this is where we get into the differences in culture and society. Looking across this vast nation, you have pockets of the country where the cops are gun guys, just like the farmers, the ranchers, the mechanics, heavy equipment operators. But there's definitely parts of the country, usually it's in the more metropolitan areas, where by and large cops are not gun guys. And if you've ever worked in law enforcement, you definitely have seen this, where there's a guy, he just for whatever reason has a badge, or maybe he just wanted the badge but doesn't care about a lot of the other things that come along with the badge, and couldn't care less about guns, couldn't care less about the gun he has on his side, couldn't care less about training with it or being proficient with it. We all know who those guys are if you've worked in law enforcement. I would say by and large, if we looked at, mostly because the big majority of officers in the country are probably more focused in metropolitan areas. That's where we have large numbers and big departments. So probably by and large, most cops arguably are not gun guys. And again, in my experience, this is definitely true, where most officers I've worked with are not really into the gun, aren't into the training, aren't into being really proficient with it. And that's kind of sad, because it is a critical tool that sometimes gets used, and you definitely can sort out the cops that are proficient from the ones that are not. And yeah, I wish they were all a little more interested sometimes in what they were doing with those deadly sidearms that they do carry. So anyway, guys, that's gonna be a wrap for today's episode. So hopefully that's helpful for you. Hopefully that's for some of you that may be the first time that you're hearing us address this. If you haven't caught way back 400 episodes ago, in episode 3 where we talked about this very thing. Oh, one last thing, and this actually was a comment. Sorry, this just popped into the head because I did mean to say something about this. And that was somebody had mentioned something about rehearsing or having memorized or knowing what you're going to say ahead of time during a traffic stop. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, and keeping things as respectful and as concise as possible is best. And so, kind of knowing, this is, if he asks me this, I'm going to respond with that. Where Jacob and I have butted heads on this topic is that Jacob's very much, if I'm going to notify, if I have to notify, if I must notify, if I choose to notify, then I'm going to say something to the effect of, officer, I'd like to let you know that I am a concealed carry permittee and I am carrying concealed today, or something to that effect. Jacob's very much about the verbal notification. I just like handing my ID over and just being done with it, and not getting worried about tripping up over my words. But I would encourage you to, those things that you memorize or recite, that it be very professional sounding in the language, meaning that using things like, I am carrying concealed, as opposed to saying, I am carrying a gun, I have a gun, avoiding the word gun, because that perks up the ears really quickly of that officer. Saying even something like firearm as opposed to gun sounds, for whatever reason, to me, and this could just be me and my perception, but I feel like, as I've observed other LE interactions, including ones that we are all able to go watch on like YouTube and stuff now, that responding with very simple, concise, professional sounding language like, officer, I'd like to inform you that I have a concealed carry permit and I am carrying today. Like, that doesn't even use the word gun in that sentence, but it tells them that you do in fact have one, and it's very non-confrontational, very professional sounding, very direct. And that's one good way of approaching it. So having some of that phraseology, because most of us tend to be a little bit nervous when we get stopped because it's sudden. We don't like it. Seeing those flashing lights makes us nervous, whatever, gets all that kind of adrenaline stuff pumping and going. And so when that starts happening, we have a tendency to stumble over our words more. So having kind of some verbiage that is prepared ahead of time, that sounds clean, concise, professional, respectful, is a good idea. All right, that's a good place to end it, wrap it up. So, guys, again, today's episode is sponsored by guns.com. A great place to buy your next gun, or even consider selling a gun, which might not be a bad idea right now. You never know. People are looking, and so values are being driven up. So guns.com, great place to check out. They also sell a lot of other accessories and other firearm-related products. But I've been really impressed, even with the inventory that they've still managed to maintain during all of this recent buying craze. Now, of course, they're going to have to ship that firearm to a local FFL, so a local dealer of yours that either guns.com will already have their info on file, or you can have that dealer contact them, get in touch with them, and provide that information so that they know that the gun's being shipped to a licensed dealer. And then, of course, you may still have to jump through the hoops as far as the whole background check thing. I mean, you'll have to go through that most likely, but of course, state dependent somewhat. But there's been some hiccups with the background checks all across the country. So hopefully that's getting resolved sooner rather than later. We'll see how that goes. So with that, I'm going to let you go. You guys take care, be safe out there, and be good. Obey the laws. And that's the one sure way you typically avoid having to have interactions with police. Anyway, you guys take care, and keep fighting the fight with this whole coronavirus and COVID-19 stuff going around. I hope that our listeners are not contracting it and not having to deal with it, and also that your families are safe and protected as well. So with that, we'll let you go. And a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care. Well, guys, oh snap! Matthew messaged me and reminded me that we have a giveaway to announce, which I should have done during the recorded part of the show, but I spaced it. So we will announce the winner though. Today, by the way, we have the weekly giveaway, which is done by registering at concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. Every week we give away great products. And so today we're announcing the winner of some, they're basically the peel and stick, reactive targets. That's the word I'm looking for. So, meaning that you shoot them and they kind of fleck or whatever, and they show you some red or orange or yellow. I believe ours, these are actually concealedcarry.com branded reactive targets. Peel and stick, you just peel them off. They actually are very, very, they use a very high quality adhesive on our particular reactive targets, which is great because they stick in a lot more conditions and environments than what some of the other competing products do, from what I've seen. And so, super excited to give away a pack. Let's see. Let me get over to where I can pull the names for the winner. But yeah, super excited to give away some of these reactive targets. Let's see here. We are giving away 25 of these, 25 reactive targets to a lucky winner. And that lucky winner is, drum roll, Byron, his first name. Last name starts with H. H as in hook. Byron H. Congratulations, Byron, on winning the reactive targets. Guys, I encourage you to sign up each week and share the giveaway with your friends and family. You get additional entries for other folks that sign up as a result of you having shared it. So, if you just do the simple, basic giveaway sign up, you're going to get one entry, but you can earn up to 10 total entries by sharing and doing the other things. I think some other options are you get more points or entries if you subscribe to, I think, our social media or YouTube or whatever. But sharing it, and for every person you get that signs up as well, you're going to get an entry. So that's a pretty good way to go. And I'll tell you, I've seen it in the past where people have won because they had multiple entries and not just the one. So remember, concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. Then you sign up on a weekly basis because that list refreshes every week. And then you have the option to click the share button after you've registered, and then you have the opportunity to get additional entries. Next week, we're giving away one of these, a concealedcarry.com tactical pen. All right. Has a little concealedcarry.com logo on there, but there you go. Concealedcarry.com tactical pen. That's the giveaway prize for this upcoming week. Guys, thanks so much. Appreciate you. We'll sign on out of here. You take care.